quite well known. The fact that, anyway, I saw that the recording came on.
Ah, darn it. See, that's the thing. That recording button hits and the attitude changes, Hey.
It does.
This is good. I mean, honestly, Richard, this is really good stuff that you and I are talking about relative to judgment and, being judgmental creatures and all that stuff. And how do we stop short of casting judgment, which eventually leads to prejudgment and everything. One thing that I want to put on the table is I think that the key is that we got to make distinctions and we have to be discerning, right? I mean, it's really imperative, especially as leaders, we have to discern, right? And then there's the fine line between discerning and judgment, right? So as we're challenged to go through life and, make a difference and everything, life on this planet requires a great deal of discernment, as we determine what we're going to do. And as we focus on what's for the higher good, which is really what I think it's about. It's about that consensus, that collaboration, that working together. In many ways, discernment can be similar to judgment in that context.
Yeah.
And I think the difference is that you're going to be in a place of judgment when you've moved out of your heart space, your heart energy, and you're in a place of blame. How does that strike you?
Yeah, in a place of blame, when the judgment is just purely negative and there's really no upside to it. There's no, I guess, optimistic values or qualities to the judgment. If it's just putting someone down, just judging them negatively, I mean, one can see that for themselves if, what good can be in that. But for the most part, I don't think anyone likes to be, judged in a negative way constantly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the same thing we're talking about, but judgment, judgment can be it is, or it can be a very useful thing. I mean, we do it all the time, so it's a necessary thing. It's just, the quality in which we do that, the tonality in which we do that. It's the how, like you said, how we discern. So yes, there is a similarity between those two things, between judgment and discernment.
Right. So as we're talking about the condition that we're in right now, you and I are discerning, that it's a situation that it is without casting judgment or, right now the big discussion is the partisan, the division, and the society we live in and how that's just kind of become normal. I guess the key is that how do I, as an actualized spirit, as a leader in society, whether it be in business or otherwise, extend myself into that space and be a difference as opposed to being part of the problem. And we were actually talking about the model of activism, right? And there's a lot of activists that are out there putting themselves out there, right? Like the Women's March and this Represent Us organization that's about people stepping up and being kind of raising their hand and saying, hey, I stand against this. And then determining how effective you can be in that context, right? Is it an effective use of your time and energy to go out there and be part of a protest? There's nothing wrong with a good protest, right? As long as it's not violent, right? And making distinctions around that and discerning how we as, again, leaders and humans can best engage and make a difference. How do you see that these days? I mean, is it really just being part of the mass of humanity that's part of like the Women's March, right? That's out there and there's lots of women and men that are out there. Or is it more of a function on being more effective and engaging more effectively in the space of activism? What are your thoughts?
I think it's the state of our union, the state of our collective consciousness. It's it's so divisive, it's so split that yes, it's activating certain reactions and calling. People are like they're feeling like, wait a minute, I can say something, and beginning to recognize that that our voice we're beginning to recognize that our voice really, it it has it has some sort of effect. We can say something, and the more that we all come together, that yes, it does have an effect. It does matter. Even though there's still a lot of people. I mean, sometimes I'm walking out there, and I just connect with a few people. I stop by a stand, and getting something, and I just have a conversation with a few people, and I've noticed that their attitude was sort of like, well, it doesn't matter anyway. The same old thinking. So there's a lot of people who think that way, who are in that in that mindset where they feel like their voice, it doesn't matter. And so I took that opportunity, and I just shared with them, like, well, wait a minute, and I sort of gave my little empowerment talk, and it was really, really, really nice to see how how he received it, and was thankful at the end. I was like, well, okay. I mean, whether he's going to do anything or not, it was just really not the point. But the fact that it was an opportunity for me to share that, and pass that on to him. So it's happening in that way. Or it could happen in that way too.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I think, as I'm resonating with what you're saying, I think it's our responsibility as individual human beings is to, number one, take responsibility for who we are and why we are and what we're here to do. And then number two, apply ourselves in that context to be a force in the best way that we can. I mean, a force in a good way, like a force of power or light or whatever, and determine how to best leverage that competence, that capability, the ambition, and who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And the key, though, is to understand who that is and why that is, and to resonate from that kind of that essence, as opposed to just going along and being part of the flow and doing what we're compelled to do just because everybody else is doing it, right? So
When you say being part of the flow, you mean being part of what everyone else is doing?
yeah, I call it consensus reality. And this is one of the challenges I have with my life as a relatively self-actualized human is I'm really challenged in this world with what we as a society, as a human species, consider to be consensus reality, right? That we all just agree that it's okay, right? Whether it be, human nature that compels us to do what feels good in the now, which is the reptilian nature of the pleasure pain dynamic, and too many people get caught up in, and I'm a human being, so I'm as guilty of it as anybody else is. Get caught up in the wanting pleasure now, right? I think, and this is one of the things I've come to terms with is that as I step into this life in this arena, and understand who I am and why I am and what my purpose is contextually as a businessman is to make the distinction of how I'm going to make a difference in a unique way, as opposed to doing it the way everybody else is doing it. There's a really good metaphor actually there's a book called The Blue Ocean Strategy. The metaphor is the blue ocean versus the red ocean, right? The blue ocean is where innovation is, right? Is where people do things differently, and I think that as we exercise our intellect and our spirit and our soul's purpose, whatever that is on the planet, that if we operate in a place of innovation, we're going to make a difference. If we operate in a place where everybody else is, that's called the red ocean. And the metaphor is that's where all the fish are, and that's where the sharks are, and they eat all the fish. It's a red ocean because everybody's there, and you can't make a difference, right? Okay. So that's one of the things I love about you is you are a difference maker. You're all about helping people identify who they are, why they are, what's going on, so that they can apply themselves effectively, right? And anybody who's engaging right now is like, I think it's our responsibility to determine how are we a difference maker, and then apply ourselves in that context in an innovative way, as a change agent, as opposed to just being like everybody else is, which is easy and comfortable to do. How's that sound?
That sounds great. Absolutely. I like the way you break it down.
Good to break it down, man. All right.